Welcome to Locked On NBA Game Night. Wes Goldberg here with Tony East. Tony, was this a better Celtics win or a worse Knicks loss?
At one point, the Knicks were shooting 60% and were losing by 15. It was a better Celtics win. They were phenomenal, and we're going to tell you why.
When that final buzzer rings, you know it's time for Locked On NBA Game Night. All the post-game reactions to every game across the league, every single night, with insights only the hosts at Locked On can provide. Prepare to experience game day reactions like never before, only on Locked On NBA Game Night. Your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On NBA Game Night. Every game, every night. We have a new intro. We have a new format. And Tony, we have a new season. And we're going to talk about it now. I'm all hopped up on iced tea and gummy bears to kind of get us through this thing. So we're going to do it. We're staying up late, and we've got the recaps. However you might be tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app, thank you for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. Today's episode is sponsored by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. The Lakers started the season with a win, and Rudy Gobert got a long-term commitment from the Timberwolves, but we're going to start today in Boston with our first game of the night. The Celtics put a whooping on the Knicks, 132-109. The Celtics poured in 29 three-pointers. Jason Tatum dominated with 37 points. He shot 14 of 18 overall, 8 for 11 from three-point range. He had 4 rebounds and 10 assists as well. Tony, what impressed you the most about the Celtics win?
I'm actually disappointed in them for missing their last 10 threes to not break the NBA record.
They missed 13 threes in a row.
Yeah.
Yes.
They were 29 for 57 or something at one point, and they could not get the 30th one to be the first team to ever do it. They're going to
win. One more point of information on that. So they tie the three-point record at 29 with 8 minutes and 35 seconds left in the game, and they spend the next 8 minutes chucking threes. And at that point, like Tatum and Jaylen Brown, Derek White, like all the starters, they were on the bench. So it was just like a lot of Peyton Pritchard, air balls. So, but they couldn't do it. And that's why records are tough to break.
Yeah, if they make 29 threes every night, they will go 8-2-0. They looked unbelievable in the first really 3 quarters when they were just reining it in. If you made me like pick a takeaway, I think it's so impressive when people back up what they say. To hear Jason Tatum get the mic in the pregame ceremony when they're getting their rings, he said, "Let's do it again." And it's one of those like corny hype up the crowd moments. And then they just come out and they dominate in the first quarter. And it's like this Knicks team that's supposed to be the second best team in the East. These guys, I mean, they went at Karl-Anthony Towns all night on both ends. And Cat did not respond very well to that. The Knicks did not respond very well to that. I get it. They're banged up. They're a new look team. But man, the Celtics might just be incredible once again, as we probably should have known because they just won the championship. But they dominated the whole time. The game was actually like the important players on the floor.
Yeah, this was wire-to-wire domination. I think the rest of the league should be terrified by what they saw Tuesday night because the Knicks are the team built to match up against the Celtics. That's everything that they did, trading for OJ Anunoby, Mikal Bridges, adding Karl-Anthony Towns. They are built to match up with the Celtics, and they got punked in this game. Now, there's a lot of reasons for that, right? We can get into some of the Knicks stuff here in a second, but in terms of the Celtics thing here, everybody's making their predictions before the season, and it's really kind of tempting. You see the chalk, right? The chalk prediction is Celtics versus Thunder, and it's tempting to kind of try to swerve and find out, like, I don't know, maybe the Bucks, maybe the Sixers, maybe the Knicks, maybe one of these teams can get out of the East, and then you watch this game, and you're like, oh yeah, I forgot the Celtics are awesome. Like they broke all these records for net rating last year. They were up there with the 2017 Warriors and these 1990s Bulls teams, and then you're reminded about why, and a big reason for it is because of the math problem that they present to their opponents on every single night. 29 of 61 from three-point range. I mean, all they did was shoot threes. 61 of their 95 attempts were from beyond the arc, and I don't know if it's going to be like that all the time, but if the Celtics are trying to figure out a way to get better than they were last year, which of course they're probably trying to do that, it probably is pushing the three-point boundary even further, right? Like pushing that envelope even more, and to be in year, I don't know, let's call this year 2 of Joe Mazzulla ball, I guess, especially coming after that championship. Like to be in this system for another year, it would make sense if they were even better at executing it, which again should be terrifying for the rest of the league.
Yeah, people were really griping about the 3-point volume. 58 was their peak number last year. I looked it up during the game while they were just making a million of them. So they did shoot a lot. I think a lot of it was how the Knicks were defending them. Like, I don't want to get too granular on this, but like they sagged off so deep on a lot of screens. So there's an open shot immediately. And if the Knicks try to run up to guard that guy, someone else is open. And with the way the Celtics starters specifically are built, even without Porzingis, because Horford can shoot, is like the second you sag off of anyone, one of their other 5-out players is open and can shoot very quickly and make it all the time, right? So teams that defend better or have a different system than that, because I think the Knicks are going to be a good defensive team when it's all said and done this year, will do better than that, right? So I think that was a big part of it. 61 is more than they took in any game last year, like I just said. So
and a bunch of those were like chucking it at the end, like we were talking about. 13 straight 3-pointers at the end to try to break the record. Like a lot of those didn't make any sense. Sam Hauser just started throwing it up from 33 feet out, whatever. But the other part of this,
but it's the starters, right? If they're all stars who can create threes in their shot at any time, guess what? That's a really good team. They're going to be good again. Sorry.
No worries. No, because Jason Tatum, there was a lot of questions about his 3-point shot dating back to the playoffs last year. One of the reasons he was benched by Steve Kerr for the Olympics is because, well, he just needed guys who could make threes. That was part of the system that he had, and there was a lot of questions. And, hey, those questions gone right away. 8 3-pointers in this game. Tied some made-up record that, of course, like Boston media put out there all over Twitter, just about, oh, he tied the record for most threes in a first half of an opening night in NBA history. And you're like, cool record, bro. But he's got it for whatever that's worth. But more than anything, he erased those concerns about his 3-point shot. Jaylen Brown had another nice night. Derek White had a great night. Drew Holiday had a good night on both ends. This team is stacked. Obviously, no Kristaps Porzingis in this game. But you mentioned the Knicks there, and I guess that's the obvious place to go to here. They are the team that was built to match up with the Celtics. They're also very clearly still not on the same page, right? Like the Karl Anthony Towns was a big sort of wrench in the whole thing. And my take on the Knicks trade that whole time, especially the Cat trade, was it makes me question what they can do in the regular season, although I think undoubtedly they have a higher ceiling now in the postseason. And they were, to me, I thought always going to get out to a slow start just because of the timing of the trade, because some of the injuries that they're dealing with here. They're clearly not on the same page. They're still working in Karl Anthony Towns, trying to figure out what he's going to do on offense specifically. Defensively, like you already said, these guys would come off, the Celtics would come off some pick and roll, and they would pull up into a wide open three because Cat and then Jericho Sims is his primary backup. We're like, I don't know, are we showing all the way up to the level of the screen? Are we playing back a little bit? And they would end up in no man's land, and the Celtics were like, cool, wide open three over and over again. And then the depth, because of the injuries, the Knicks were so thin, and their bench just got wiped by the Celtics. Their starters did too, but also their bench. So, but let's talk about Karl Anthony Towns. What did you think about his Knicks regular season debut?
Yeah, well, the first thing I want to say is weirdly but predictable. The whole team looked small because they are right. They were trading for centers, and now Precious Achiuwa's hurt, and they lost Isaiah Hartenstein, and it's like, oh, their bench centers Jericho Sims, and then they're just very limited on size in that way, which also hurts in these kind of matchups. And Mikal Bridges didn't play very big, and that is being small is my Cat takeaway. He was like fine, 12 points on 9 shots, hit the glass pretty well, showed how he can help this team, but like they were showing it perfectly to me. I had it in my notes, and then TNT nailed it at their halftime. Was he would like have a post up with a small and just kind of like float, not demand the ball or get in position or just like be a big, right? He didn't need to do that stuff in Minnesota, especially last year. And that, it didn't feel like he was super forceful and playing like as a 5, right? And I think that's going to be what it takes for him to really fit, especially in a Tibbs system. So yeah, he's a great spacer. He only took 2 threes. That's the least of any starter on the Knicks, right? So maybe I'm overthinking this, but it felt like he was on a new team, first of all, that he got picked on both ends. And if they need him to be a Knicks center, yeah, he's going to have to space. He's one of the best shooting bigs ever, but he's got to be a beast on the inside every so often. And it just didn't feel like he had that kind of power and oomph.
2 3-pointers, like you mentioned, that's as many as Josh Hart had. That's not the right. That's not the right version of this equation. That's not
none of it was right.
Traded for him.
None of it.
Yeah. And then you mentioned like the Celtics baited him into trying to get him to play post up ball because they knew, okay, like let's give Karl. They put Drew Holiday on him to start the game, and they had Al Horford guarding Josh Hart. And so you're like, okay, like Karl Anthony Towns did the thing that a big man should do and says, you got Drew Holiday on me, I'm going to go into the post. And early on, he actually took Drew into the post, was really patient, and got a nice shot and made it. And I'm like, okay, like here you go. But this is all what the Celtics are trying to make you do, right? It's, hey, we'll give you the post-ups, the inefficient post-ups. We're going to beat you with three-pointers. That two-pointer is not worth as much as the three-pointers that we're taking and making. And so I thought he sort of played right into their game, but then also started drifting away from it and then ended up doing a whole lot of nothing. And then the Knicks, I guess their new rotation with all this new stuff happening is going to be Jalen Brunson and Mikal Bridges on the court when Karl-Anthony Towns and OG Anunoby are off, and then vice versa after you get past the starting lineup. And in those lineups where it was Towns and no Brunson, I didn't notice Towns.
Yeah.
I mean, there was a lot. Like, he played 23 minutes in this game, and I noticed maybe 3 of them. It was just a tough cat game. But like you said, he looked like a new player on a new team, and maybe that's what it is, without making too many overreactions to the first night of the season.
It's going to be wild looking back if you're the Knicks too and go, wait, we shot 55% and only had 11 turnovers and we got ran off the floor because they just looked small on defense, right? Like a lot of their players who shot it well. Brunson, 9 for 14. Deuce McBride was incredible. Sorry, he's not going to get much airtime. 8 for 10. Cam Payne did some stuff. Those guys all played very well and scored a lot. They're also all like my height, right? Like that team's not going to defend very well if they just don't have enough size on the floor, and they're good defenders. All had off nights except Bridges got going in the second half. So like that, to merge what they did well and what they hope to be, they either need their size to be better on offense or their small players to help them be a good defensive team. And tonight they didn't have enough of either of those things.
Yeah, 5 offensive rebounds on the night. Very different than what the Knicks were last year.
Yeah.
And I still think they're trying to figure that part of it out. We're going to move on. Bronny and LeBron James officially became the first father-son duo to play together in an NBA game. But the story of the game was Anthony Davis. We'll tell you why that is after this here on Locked On NBA. Today's episode of Locked On NBA is brought to you by FanDuel, rather. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. It's America's #1 sportsbook and NFL schMNFL. It's NBA time. And so when you look at FanDuel's lines for Wednesday night's action, the 76ers, 3.5-point underdogs to the Milwaukee Bucks. And we already learned no Joel Embiid, no Paul George, not a whole lot of star power for the 76ers. I'm a little bit higher on the Bucks in consensus. I think Giannis is going to come out gangbusters. I think Damian Lillard's going to do the same thing. 3.5 points, that's all the Bucks are getting in that one? I don't know about that. When you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets on FanDuel, guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. You can do that at FanDuel.com. Welcome back to Locked On NBA Game Night. Every game, every night. The best way to support the show is to subscribe on YouTube and on your favorite podcast app. Let's go to Los Angeles, where the Lakers beat the Timberwolves 110-103. Anthony Davis dominated this one, 36 points, 16 rebounds, 4 assists, and 3 blocks. Here's Locked On Lakers with more.
This is Andy Kamenetsky, co-host of the Locked On Lakers podcast, and the Lakers, for the first time since 2016, opened their season with a victory, 110-103, over the Minnesota Timberwolves. Anthony Davis leads the way with 36 points, 16 rebounds, 3 blocks, including a nasty French rejection on a Rudy Gobert dunk attempt. Rui Hachimura had 18 points to go along with 5 rebounds. The Lakers had 72 points in the paint in this game, in part because they also had 15 offensive rebounds, only 7 turnovers. Other than a difficult night from behind the arc, 5 of 30, really nothing to complain about for this game. A lot to be optimistic about with the Lakers. And yes, LeBron James and Bronny James had their moment in the second quarter, played about 3 minutes together. And it is a moment that obviously LeBron, Bronny, and the James family will remember forever, especially because it came in a win. Make sure you are checking out Locked On Lakers on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts for all your updates about the Lakers this season.
Before we get to Bronny and LeBron, Tony, what stood out to you about the Lakers win?
Man, he nailed all of what I wanted to say. This is why we have local experts here at Locked On. Where else are you going to hear that it's their first opening night win in 8 years? Are you kidding? That's crazy. I did not know that. Yeah, Anthony Davis was the standout by a country mile in this game. This is his thing, right? When he goes against the reigning defensive player of the year that wasn't him, Anthony Davis is ready to go. Boy, was he good in this game, often right at Gobert's expense. with his 36-16 and awesome defense. Any other 4 Lakers plus Anthony Davis is a credible defensive lineup, which is already really important for how they build the rotation. JJ Redick did a pretty good job in pretty much every aspect of this game. I thought never had a weird lineup out there, flowed pretty well. Got guys that don't normally do things to do better things, which we'll talk about later. But if Anthony Davis is like, he sprinkled in some jumpers, he was awesome around the basket, he was awesome on the glass, 15 free throw attempts. In the way the NBA is officiated now, that's a really big deal. It was a huge game from him, and they got pretty good nights from lots of guys, but they needed someone to take them home because this game was pretty clunky and ugly a lot of the time, very much the opposite of the way the Celtics played. But they needed someone to carry them home, and it was Anthony Davis. He was awesome the whole game.
Yeah, a little bit of a slow start to the season for LeBron, who I don't know if you've heard, he's 39 years old and he'll be 40 in December.
You mean Bronny Sr. Please refer to him correctly.
Rui Hachimura starting his all-star campaign early here. Some nice moments for Austin Reeves. D'Angelo Russell had a nice second half after a rough first half. But yeah, look, the story is Anthony Davis. And you've heard JJ Redick talk going into the season about how he wants to utilize Anthony Davis. He wants to free Anthony Davis. And boy, did he let that Bronco buck in this one. This was not just Anthony Davis, hey, you're our pick and roll screener guy, roll to the rim. And just score in that way. He actually had Anthony Davis running pick and roll in a lot of these games. Small, big pick and rolls with whether it was Austin Reeves or D'Angelo Russell setting that initial screen for Anthony Davis and then Davis making plays out of that. I thought that was really interesting. He took 3 3-point attempts in this game. JJ Redick also talked about wanting to up Anthony Davis's 3-point attempt rate. The Lakers overall took 30. They're probably going to want more than that, I think, going forward. It's really hard to figure out a way to who's going to shoot all these threes, but Anthony Davis is going to have to be a part of that, and I think this was a good first step in that direction. But then again, when he's as dominant as he was, especially on the inside in the paint, then there's no reason to take all those threes. And that's, I think what Redick will probably end up going back to is, yeah, we didn't hit that 40-point mark that we probably want to hit in terms of our three-point shooting volume, but what we did in the paint was so efficient that why ignore that? And that was because of Anthony Davis. I loved how they used him as in that triple threat position, running those dribble handoffs, making plays out of that spot. That is going to open up the Lakers offense.
Yeah, they did 2 other things that were really interesting with AD. One was they had this Anthony Davis, Jackson Hayes front court that for like the first couple minutes it was in, I was like, oh, this is rough. This is rough. And then it was awesome after that. Hayes really came alive after his first stint, ended up having a very nice game. That was really cool. The other thing the Lakers did that I think everybody watching had an eyebrow raised was they did this crazy zone with Anthony Davis at the top roaming around. I'm like, oh, good luck throwing some passes over the top of this one. That's going to be cool that that's mixed in the whole season. So clearly the Lakers and JJ Redick have some sort of plan for Anthony Davis to be a wrecker. And look, we got to talk about if Rui Hachimura can be this consistent of a jump shooter, that's going to do a lot for their offense too. Because I everybody believes Reeves and Russell will do better than a combined 1 for 12 from deep with their jump shots going forward. But I mean, Rui took 4 threes, and his mid-range shot was buttery. That's going to be big for them, too. So I liked what the Lakers did in this game.
Yeah, it's sort of been the question for Rui for the last couple of years, right? It's like if only he's got all these good games and not so many of the bad games. I thought he had a lot of good plays defensively as well. Led the Lakers in plus-minus at plus 19. But let's move on to the big story that everybody's going to be talking about tomorrow. With about 4 minutes to go in the second quarter, Bronny James checks in with LeBron James. He played 3.5 minutes, missed a three-pointer, got bullied there by Julius Randle on his first defensive possession. But look, he crashed the boards. He had some decent defensive sequences, including forcing Anthony Edwards into a tough miss. This is the thing I keep saying with Bronny. I don't know if he's an NBA player right now. I know he knows how to play the NBA game. Like, he's pretty advanced in terms of just like knowing where to be as a rookie. And I think the reason for that is obvious. The guy that he grew up with, LeBron James, he taught him the right way, coached him right. And so on the court, he knows like what he's supposed to be doing. It's just a matter of doing it, which is the hard part for him. But what did you think of his minutes?
In terms of the significance of the moment, like what we were watching, it was perfect, I thought, because the Griffies were there, which is cool. They didn't do it in some crap. Like, I get that garbage time's probably like where Bronny will play with the Lakers this year, but like to have him play and have Julius Randle just punk him immediately was like the perfect, hey, this is the NBA, let's go, dude, kind of moment. And I'm really mad at the basketball gods because we almost got a LeBron to Bronny assist, wide open 3. It looked good the whole way. I audibly,
Lakers fans were going nuts.
I yelled in my house, man. I think everybody wanted that to go in.
Yeah.
It would have been really cool. But yeah, he looked fine. It was perfect too for the Lakers that they were up 15-ish right at the time. So they had a little bit of buffer to get away with it. I do feel bad saying that, but they did lose those minutes. But yeah, Bronny had the one possession where Randall punked him, and the rest of it, he was totally fine. He just looked like anybody else out there. So, I mean, you can't miss both your shots all season, but it was fine. More importantly, it was awesome and probably something we'll never see again, right? Or maybe you never see again in the NBA, which is what makes it remarkable.
Absolutely. And you mentioned the Griffeys sitting there. Really cool for that to be happening. I look, I think it was the right time to do it. Just knock it out the first game of the season. This is not something that's going to be a pregame question for JJ Redick the rest of the way going forward. It's like, hey, we did it. You saw it once in the preseason. You saw it again now. You could send Bronny James to the G League now, and that's perfectly fine. You got this thing out of the way. You already mentioned you did it when you had a lead. We did not see Bronny James in the second half when the game got a little bit tighter there at the end. I don't know that that was ever the plan, but we didn't see him there. I thought it was perfect. Well done, JJ Redick. I think they all in the Lakers handled this the right way, and LeBron got his moment, and you did it on opening night on TNT. It just made all the sense in the world, and we knew JJ Redick was going to do this early. He said as much. First game of the year, basically as soon as they invited the Griffeys to sit in the courtside seats, I think we all knew it was going to happen tonight. I do want to touch on the Timberwolves here because they did look a little bit clunky. Plus, we did get some news about Rudy Gobert and his long-term future with Minnesota. We'll get to all that next here on Locked On NBA. Today's episode of Locked On NBA is brought to you by Game Time. The basketball season is finally here, and Game Time has a new feature called Game Time Picks that makes getting tickets to see your favorite teams play live even easier. There's so many ways to save money on tickets, no matter when you buy. Game Time Picks filters out all the fluff to show you only the incredible deals on great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Game Time Picks shows you the best value on tickets. They have last-minute deals on tickets right up to the start of the event, and even an hour after it starts. It's great for baseball season, if you ask me. Exclusive flash deals and sponsored deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. Plus zone deals where you pick the section and Game Time picks a seat for big savings. And by toggling on all-in pricing, you'll see the total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. So take the guesswork out of buying concert tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. Welcome back to Locked On NBA Game Night. Every game, every night. Before we get to Rudy Gobert's extension here, clunky game for the Timberwolves in that Lakers game. Again, they lose 110-103. They make that little comeback, Anthony Edwards-powered comeback there towards the end. But we did get the first look at this new look Timberwolves team. Karl-Anthony Towns obviously out. Julius Randle is starting. So they start Mike Conley, Anthony Edwards, Jaden McDaniels, Julius Randle, Rudy Gobert. We had Dante DiVincenzo off the bench. Obviously Naz Reid. But it was a rough game that the Timberwolves basically lost in the first half. And mainly because of turnovers. They just looked really sloppy. And I don't know that I expect that from a Chris Finch coach team, but maybe that's, you can just attribute it to the fact that a lot of this is just new. What do you think?
Yeah, I got to take a huge L because those who listen to you and I talk together, we talked about the preseason. I was like, whoa, look at the Timberwolves offense. This is awesome. They look great. They can shoot. They're moving it. And then they did none of that for the first 2.8 quarters of this game. And it was like the worst, most pathetic kind of turnover where it's like you just are dribbling up the floor and turn to the side and throw the easiest to intercept pass of all time. It's not like they were trying something advanced or like somebody was handling it. It was just lazy crap, right? Like that is so infuriating to watch. And
Off inbounds. Yeah.
And the Chris Finch stuff where he's just like, what can he even do? Like it's not a coaching issue. It's nothing he can say. It's just them messing up, right? So in that way, it was kind of infuriating because they couldn't get anything going on offense. And Randall working his way in a little bit. He had some good moments, some not so good. And they didn't get very much shooting out of anybody except for Ant in the starting five at all. And their bench was Naz Reid had a nice moment in the second half, but like it just never clicked for them as a team, despite this awesome preseason. And that really hurt them because their defense was probably fine. Like 110 should be enough for them to win with the talent they have. 110 allowed, I should say. But it wasn't at all because their offense looked so clunky. It was so hard for them to score. What they have in the first quarter? Like points. I don't even know if they cracked 20.
Yeah, this was the
23.
This was the full Julius Randle experience. He ends up going 5 for 10, but doesn't it feel like he went 5 for 15? It
Yes.
was it was just one of those Julius Randle nights where he makes like these impossible falling down 5-foot shots through traffic, and you're like, what's going on here? And then other times he's taking the same shot and missing the rim completely. But the guy that we need to talk about, and I'm gonna go overreaction off the first night
Ooh.
of NBA basketball. It might be
Conley.
over for Mike. It might be
Gotta be
over for
Conley.
Mike Conley. It
Yeah.
might be over. 1 for 7 overall, 0 for 5 from 3-point range. Worst of all, 3 turnovers. You have one job, Mike Conley, and it's to not turn the ball over. And he had 2 assists, 3 turnovers. That is an upside down in a big way turnover ratio. And it started kind of heading in this direction towards the end of last season, kind of quietly. The difference now is that you have a legitimate guy who can replace him in Dante DiVincenzo. And in fact, that's exactly what Chris Finch did in the second half. He benched Mike Conley. He played only 20 minutes in this game. DiVincenzo played 31 minutes. I called it an overreaction for a reason, because I don't think we're going to see this just now, like right now. But I do think by the end of the year, there's a very strong chance that DiVincenzo ends up starting over Conley.
Yeah, I mean, he did not look good at all. And it's very funny that it comes against the Lakers, who everybody for years has been like, why didn't they just get Conley in that trade? And they're like, that's why. Conley and Joe Ingles, 2 vets that they were really hoping could be reliable for them and like be maybe their best 2 passers on the team, did not look good at all, right? A lot of the old creakiness of them was not really helping. And that, is something you can, I guess, reasonably expect at those guys' ages, but they need to get more out of them if they're going to be helpful, because everyone else who didn't play for Minnesota today is young and unproven, and they don't really want to do that. They're trying to win. So they would like one of these 2 at least to be good, or else they're going to have Anthony Edwards be de facto point guard with DiVincenzo in that starting 5, like you mentioned, like they went to. And that's great. Ant can get by anybody. His first assist came in the 4th quarter, right? Or maybe late in the 3rd. Like it took forever for that to really evolve for them. So as good as Conley was last year, and as great as it was for them to get him for nothing, basically, it might be. I hope it's not. He's an Indianapolis native, but it was not a good start to the year.
The 2 teams involved in the big trade right before training camp, right before media day, the Knicks and the Timberwolves, just looked clunky. Maybe that's all it is. I think we could still stay really high on these guys. Don't want to overreact too much on the first night of NBA basketball, but the Celtics looked legit, and the Lakers got off to the start that they wanted. But it was reported minutes before tip-off of Lakers Timberwolves that Minnesota and Rudy Gobert agreed on a 3-year, $110 million extension. So Gobert turns down his $47 million player option for next season to take a deal worth almost $37 million in average annual value over the course of that 3-year contract. So a good bit of business for the Timberwolves, who save $10 million next season. I think a good bit of business for Gobert, who gets another, maybe his last long-term contract at 32 years old. That's going to take him into his age 35 season. And my big takeaway here, Tony, is like within a month, the Timberwolves went from one of the toughest looking salary cap situations in the league to basically cleaning up their books and setting their course for the Anthony Edwards window.
Major way. They can keep Naz Reid now, which is obviously huge. And DiVincenzo is one of the best 10 contracts in the league, probably, right? He's a very good player making close to $10 million. They can maybe keep Nickeil Alexander-Walker. They can figure out what they're going to do with Randall. Like they have options to even maybe avoid the tax. And who's really happy is these 2 ownership groups that have no freaking idea who's going to own the team a month from now are like, great, cool. This is a good team that's not as expensive. Yeah, really good work to get it done. I still think this may end up being on the little high side for Gobert in the end. But what really mattered for them was specifically next year, getting that player option number way down. And if that means if he's still even kind of good at age 34, this is probably worth it for them to do. Trade kicker and player option. They'll, through gritted teeth, go, yeah, we love that. That's awesome. But it's very important that they were able to get that flexibility, and they're still good. Well, they should be. They didn't look good tonight. So I think it's a pretty good deal for Minnesota, even though obviously the back end of this could look not so awesome.
Yeah, we're seeing this now too. This reminds me a little bit of the Drew Holiday deal with Boston that they hashed out last year too. It's like, yeah, we know you're older. You're not the same player you were, and this is probably going to look tough at the end of this, but the window is right now, and screw 2 years from now. We just need to make sure that we get out of it right in this moment so that we can maintain some flexibility. John Hollinger over at The Athletic, who used to work in front offices in the NBA, said that basically by doing this, it's possible to stay below the first apron and even maybe avoid the tax entirely, like you were talking about. And so I always defer to the people who have done this for a job to just double check my math.
What do they
on
know?
this. Yeah, exactly. So this is I think Tim Connolly had a plan here. I think this works. They chose Gobert over Karl-Anthony Towns. We'll see how that ends up working out, but he's obviously a foundational part to what this team wants to do, especially defensively. And I actually thought he had a pretty okay night. 13 points, 14 rebounds in this game, 5 of 8 shooting. Had a nice take to the basket. You're like, oh, wow, you could dribble? That was kind of cool. So, yeah, overall, a good bit of business for Minnesota to start the year, despite the fact that it wasn't a good game to start the season.
And if
Anything
you
else
have
on this?
any
Yep.
way you can make a move to keep your cult hero backup center who had maybe the most iconic Timberwolves line of my lifetime for their playoff game, yeah, maybe you should do that. And they found a way to do it. So good job, Tim Conley and the Minnesota Timberwolves.
That wraps up Locked On NBA Game Night. Every game, every night. Make sure you're subscribed on YouTube and Odyssey and wherever you get your podcasts.